Mark and Emily Nolan seemed like the perfect couple, but behind closed doors, secrets festered, lies multiplied, and the man sworn to protect became the one who destroyed her life forever. Mark Nolan's life was the definition of contradiction. On the surface, he was the ideal police officer, disciplined, reliable, and respected by colleagues and neighbors alike. At 34, he had worked for the Crestwood Police Department for over a decade, earning commendations for quick thinking and unwavering dedication. To the outside world, he was a model of professionalism, a man who risked his life to protect the community while maintaining the image of a devoted husband to Emily Nolan, a gentle and empathetic school counselor beloved by students and parents alike. Their marriage, at first glance, seemed solid. Neighbors often remarked on the way Mark would walk Emily to her car in the morning, or how they appeared together at local charity events, smiling and exchanging small gestures of affection. Yet beneath this calm exterior, the foundations of their life together were beginning to crack, invisible fractures forming in the shadows where no one else could see. Mark had started to compartmentalize his existence, creating separate worlds that rarely intersected. During patrols, he spent long stretches away from the station, often taking detours or disappearing into quiet areas of the town for hours at a time. At first, supervisors dismissed it as dedication, assuming he was merely thorough in his rounds. Yet some colleagues began noticing patterns: unusual breaks, extended solo assignments, and a tendency to avoid partners. A few whispered about how Mark seemed distracted, preoccupied, and secretive, but nothing concrete emerged. No reports were filed, no official complaints lodged. It was as though Mark had perfected the art of living a double life, balancing a public facade of integrity while pursuing private indulgences he believed would never be discovered. At home, Emily remained unsuspecting, absorbed in her own responsibilities. She worked tirelessly to help children struggling with anxiety and trauma, often staying late to counsel students and meet with concerned parents. Her commitment to others left her little time to question the growing distance in her marriage. She noticed Mark coming home later than usual, sometimes smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfumes or scents, but she rationalized these moments as stress-related, convincing herself that long hours on the job took a toll on him. She had no reason to suspect the secret life that was unfolding around her. The clandestine meetings, the whispered conversations on phone lines erased before she could see, the hidden rendezvous in deserted corners of the town. It was the community that unknowingly began to piece together the first hints of Mark's duplicity. A civilian, passing by an empty lot on the edge of Crestwood, noticed the flicker of movement in a parked police cruiser during daylight hours, unusual for an officer supposedly patrolling another district. The observer did not intervene but recorded the moment on a phone, sending the video to the local police department. Internal Affairs quietly received the tip, marking the beginning of a slow, relentless investigation into Mark's activities. The evidence was circumstantial, fragmented, and grainy, yet it planted the first seeds of suspicion that would later engulf him. While these quiet suspicions festered, Emily continued her life unaware of the storm building around her. She maintained her morning routines, prepared meals, tended to her home, and offered guidance to students with patience and warmth. Mark, meanwhile, continued his meticulous balancing act, moving between work and secret encounters, confident that he could manage both realities. But no secret is truly hidden forever. Every deviation, every unexplained absence, every erased message in Mark's phone was a step toward inevitable exposure. The perfect life he had carefully curated was on the brink of collapse, and Emily's world was about to be shattered in ways she could never anticipate. Within weeks, the tip, the hidden patterns, and Mark's carefully concealed decisions would converge into a moment of tragedy, and the calm veneer of their lives would shatter, leaving a trail of questions that no one in Crestwood could ignore. The morning Emily Nolan's life ended began like any other, with the faint light of dawn spilling over the quiet streets of Crestwood. A neighbor, heading out for an early jog, noticed something unusual. The front door of the Nolan residence was slightly ajar. At first it seemed like a minor oversight, easily explained by a forgetful morning routine. But as the jogger approached, a sinking feeling set in. The house was unusually silent, no hum of the refrigerator, no distant sounds of a radio, nothing that suggested the usual rhythm of a home waking up. Curiosity and concern drew the neighbor closer, and what they discovered would shock the community. Emily lay at the bottom of the staircase, her body in a position that initially suggested a fall. The scene was chaotic in its stillness. A framed photograph lay shattered on the floor, seemingly displaced by her descent, while small household items were scattered across the carpet. At first glance, it could have been a tragic accident, a misstep in the dim morning light. Yet subtle details hinted at something far darker. Detectives arrived swiftly, their presence transforming the home from a domestic space into a controlled crime scene. The initial survey revealed inconsistencies that set off alarms immediately. Emily's injuries, upon closer examination, were not consistent with a simple tumble down the stairs. Bruising on her arms suggested she had tried to defend herself, struggling against the grip of someone else. Her phone, a device she always carried, had been wiped clean, the messages and call logs erased, as if someone wanted to remove any trace of her final interactions. Even more perplexing, the security camera at the entrance had been unplugged from its power source, leaving a critical gap in the record of her last moments. Mark Nolan arrived at the scene shortly after the police, summoned by dispatch. His reaction appeared dramatic and anguished, fitting the image of a grieving husband. Detectives, trained to observe even the smallest signs, noted the precision of his responses. He seemed aware of exactly where to direct attention, what to emphasize, and which details to highlight, almost as if he had rehearsed his performance. Despite the outward display of grief, the mounting evidence painted a different picture. Emily's final evening, meticulously reconstructed through witness accounts and store surveillance footage, showed no indication of distress. She had returned from an afternoon errand alone, calm and composed, her movements deliberate, her attention focused on mundane routines. There was no confrontation, no indication of fear, nothing that suggested impending danger. The investigators faced a chilling question. How could a woman so careful, so predictable, meet such a violent end in her own home? Every detail pointed to deliberate intervention. The scattered household items, the erased phone, and the disabled security camera suggested premeditation, not accident. The shattered photograph, initially dismissed as collateral damage, hinted at a struggle. Each clue was a puzzle piece forming a portrait of a death that was anything but natural. As forensic teams examined the staircase and surrounding areas, microscopic evidence began to emerge, indicating contact with another person. The traces were subtle yet telling, a silent testimony that Emily had not fallen alone. The house, once a sanctuary, became a repository of secrets, bearing witness to events that only the dead could recount fully. Mark Nolan, once a symbol of authority and protection, now hovered at the center of an investigation whose implications would extend far beyond a single morning. What had appeared as a tragic accident was rapidly evolving into a case of deliberate violence, and Crestwood's sense of safety was already beginning to fracture under the weight of suspicion. As the investigation into Emily Nolan's death deepened, a darker and more complicated story began to emerge, one that stretched far beyond a tragic accident. Detectives focused on Officer Mark Nolan, the man who had once been trusted by the entire community to uphold the law. While he had maintained an image of calm and control, evidence now suggested that he had been living a double life, one that intertwined with secrecy, deception, and dangerous impulses. The first concrete piece of evidence came in the form of the grainy cell phone video captured by a civilian. The footage showed a police cruiser parked in an empty lot during working hours, unusual activity occurring inside. Although the video did not clearly show faces, it was enough to confirm the suspicion that Nolan was using his position to conduct meetings that were entirely inappropriate and outside the bounds of his duty. When investigators pressed further, a woman came forward, stepping into the spotlight that Mark had hoped would never touch him. Samantha Pierce, a local receptionist, admitted to a clandestine affair with Mark that had lasted for months. She explained that their meetings had mostly occurred while Mark was on duty, taking advantage of the public trust placed in him and the relative invisibility offered by an empty cruiser in quiet parts of town. Samantha's testimony painted a picture of a man willing to bend rules, betray vows, and manipulate situations to satisfy his desires. It was a revelation that stunned the investigators, who were beginning to see the outlines of a motive that had previously been invisible. The timing of Samantha's statements became critical when correlated with Emily's final movements. Investigators discovered that Emily had recently found evidence of the affair, messages and calls that suggested her husband's loyalty was compromised. Rather than confront Mark directly, she had attempted to clarify the situation, seeking answers without creating a scene. Samantha revealed that Mark had been aware Emily was starting to piece together the truth, and that knowledge had left him panicked and unpredictable. Every lie, every secret meeting, and every falsified patrol log suddenly became more than just acts of personal deception. They were elements of a larger story that led directly to the day of Emily's death. Further investigation into Mark's patrol logs revealed discrepancies that were impossible to ignore. He had claimed to be responding to minor incidents on the opposite side of Crestwood during the critical time frame of Emily's death. But traffic cameras and GPS data told a different story. His cruiser had been much closer to the Nolan residence than he admitted, the vehicle stationary for several minutes in a location that matched the estimated time of Emily's fatal encounter. Detectives noted that the evidence aligned disturbingly with Samantha's revelations. Mark's secret life, once hidden in shadows, had overlapped dangerously with the life he had built with Emily. Forensic experts contributed additional layers to the growing case against him. Analysis of Emily's clothing and the scene revealed traces of contact, fibers that matched materials from Mark's uniform, and footprints consistent with his issued boots. The evidence painted a picture of confrontation, struggle, and a death that was deliberate, not accidental. The house, once a place of domestic safety, had become the stage of a violent and calculated act, executed by someone trusted above all else. By the time the department compiled all the findings, Mark Nolan had transformed from a respected officer into the prime suspect in a murder investigation. His image, carefully crafted over years of service, crumbled under scrutiny. The affair, once thought to be a personal matter, now appeared as the catalyst for a tragic and fatal sequence of events. As investigators prepared to confront him officially, the community watched in disbelief. The man sworn to uphold the law had become its most chilling violator, and the revelation of his secret life only intensified the shock and horror surrounding Emily Nolan's death. The reconstruction of Emily Nolan's final hours revealed a chilling sequence of events that exposed the fragility of trust and the lengths one person could go to conceal the truth. Investigators worked tirelessly to piece together a timeline, using surveillance footage, witness statements, and digital records to determine precisely what had transpired in the hours leading up to her death. Emily had arrived home in the late evening, carrying a small bag of groceries, her movements calm and deliberate. There was no sign of urgency, no indication that she felt threatened. Security footage captured her entering the house, and everything seemed ordinary until the recording abruptly stopped. The camera had been unplugged, a detail that immediately suggested deliberate interference. From that point, detectives relied heavily on indirect evidence. GPS data from Mark Nolan's patrol cruiser contradicted his statements. He claimed to have been miles away, responding to minor incidents. Yet the vehicle's location placed him within walking distance of his own home during the critical period. For 6 crucial minutes, the cruiser remained stationary near the Nolan residence, unaccounted for in his official reports. The precision of this gap in his timeline, combined with the absence of witnesses, suggested a calculated plan to create an alibi while he carried out acts that would irreversibly alter the course of his marriage. Inside the house, forensic teams discovered subtle yet damning evidence. Boot prints in the hallway near the staircase matched those issued to Mark, overlapping with Emily's own footprints in a way that suggested a confrontation and, rather than a simple accident. Microscopic fibers from his uniform were found on her blouse, evidence that placed him in direct contact with Emily shortly before her injuries were inflicted. Bruises on her arms and wrists indicated defensive actions, signs that she had struggled against someone stronger and more controlling. Each detail reinforced the emerging picture. Emily's death was not an accident, but the result of deliberate force. Investigators also focused on the manipulation of the environment. The unplugged security camera, the erased messages on Emily's phone, and the displaced objects in the home were all consistent with someone attempting to obscure their involvement. Mark's knowledge of the house and its routines, as both husband and officer, gave him the ability to anticipate the investigative steps that would be taken. This understanding, combined with his position of authority, allowed him to momentarily mask his actions, creating a temporary illusion of safety and accident that would ultimately unravel under forensic scrutiny. The juxtaposition of Emily's ordinary evening with the extraordinary violence that followed created a stark contrast, one that investigators could not ignore. Every trace, every fiber, and every inconsistency added layers to a narrative of premeditation. It was clear that the final minutes of Emily's life were dominated not by misfortune, but by a deliberate confrontation, an event in which she faced someone she trusted and was met with fatal force. As the timeline solidified, the case against Mark Nolan grew impossible to dispute. The data-aligned GPS locations, forensic evidence, and behavioral patterns converged to reveal a stark truth. Emily's death was not the result of chance. It was the consequence of a calculated act committed by a man who had betrayed the sacred trust of both his profession and his marriage. The investigation had peeled back the layers of deception, exposing the cold, methodical reality that lay beneath the surface of Crestwood's most shocking tragedy. Every minute, every movement, every choice made by Mark during that critical hour became a testament to the darkness that had been hidden behind the badge and the facade of domestic normalcy. The arrest of Mark Nolan marked the beginning of the final, unrelenting chapter in the tragedy that had engulfed Crestwood. The community, still reeling from the shock of Emily's death, watched in disbelief as the officer, once held up as a symbol of protection, was led away in handcuffs. The weight of betrayal was immense, not only for Emily's family, but for every neighbor, colleague, and friend who had trusted him implicitly. What had seemed like a respected man's life of service now unraveled into a story of deceit, obsession, and irreversible violence. In court, the focus shifted from speculation to cold, hard evidence, a chain of facts so meticulously constructed that it left little room for denial. Every layer of secrecy Mark had built, every alibi he had crafted, began to collapse under scrutiny. The prosecution presented a timeline of Mark's movements that left no gaps. The GPS data from his cruiser, previously hidden in plain sight, demonstrated that he had been in close proximity to his home during the moments Emily had been attacked. The forensic evidence further reinforced the narrative. Boot prints, fiber traces, and bruising patterns aligned perfectly with the assertion that Mark had been directly involved in the fatal struggle. Investigators detailed how he had manipulated the scene, unplugging the security camera, erasing messages on Emily's phone, displacing objects, to create the appearance of an accidental death. Each revelation painted a portrait of a man who had used his authority and insider knowledge to orchestrate a meticulously staged crime. Samantha Pierce's testimony added another dimension to the case. Her relationship with Mark was presented not as a private matter, but as the catalyst for the events that culminated in Emily's death. The affair, conducted during Mark's duty hours, revealed his willingness to exploit both his professional position and his marriage for personal gratification. More importantly, it demonstrated motive: the fear that his double life would be exposed. Samantha recounted how Mark had reacted when he realized Emily had begun discovering the truth, a reaction that, in hindsight, became chillingly predictive of the violent outcome. Her admission placed him in a context of premeditation, showing that the fatal events were not spontaneous, but an extension of a web of secrecy and betrayal. The trial became a focal point for the community, a public reckoning of trust and betrayal. Neighbors, colleagues, and friends followed the proceedings closely, astonished at how someone so admired could descend into such darkness. Emily's family, mourning the loss of a beloved daughter and sister, bore witness to every detail, finding grim solace in the methodical assembly of truth. As each piece of evidence was laid bare, GPS records, forensic analyses, and first-hand testimonies, it became impossible to separate Mark Nolan, the officer, from Mark Nolan, the murderer. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict of guilty. The courtroom was filled with a tense silence as the sentence was read: life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. The consequences were final, a legal closure to a personal and communal devastation. Outside the courthouse, Emily's family and supporters sought ways to honor her memory, establishing initiatives to help individuals affected by betrayal and domestic violence, ensuring that her life's work in supporting others would continue. Mark Nolan's fall from grace served as a chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that a life built on trust can shatter in an instant, and that even those sworn to protect can harbor darkness beyond imagining. Crestwood would never forget the tragedy, a story of love turned fatal, secrets hidden too long, and the devastating consequences of betrayal left unchecked.